tonight I want to talk about starting out. How to start out those conversations and transition, and just give you some things that you can do and a couple of things to avoid, and then to kind of end up where we just started about leaving doors open, and I'll give you a couple resources too. So do you remember the verses that we've memorized up to this point? What's the first one? Which is found in... Good. All right, Romans 3:23, for all have fallen short. No, what was the second one? (6:23). For the wages of sin is death, and the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ. All right, the next one, third verse that I asked you to memorize. Oh, we talked about this last week. 5:8. Yeah, you just had them backwards. Yeah. So Romans 5:8 says what? While we were yet sinners. Good. So those are the three. If you didn't get those, write them down. Week 1 was 3:23. Week 2 is 6:23. Week 3 is 5:8. And then this next week, I want you to memorize Romans chapter 10, 9 and 10. Okay? So East Tennessee is 9 and 10. So Romans 10, 9 and 10. That'll be the fourth in your Romans. But okay, so starting out. When you start out an encounter, especially if it's one of those times where out of all the people that I talked to in these last 4 days, only one of them I knew before then. And so out of all those times, you have to figure out, okay, where am I going to start? Because there's just this random person here. Where's the place I start? So first thing that you need to do is look for connections. That's the point number 1, is connections. Find some kind of common ground. You can be real with people. Sometimes being funny breaks the ice a little bit. But some of the things have been mentioned already. You talked about how God can heal mental health because that's something that you've wrestled with in your past. You talked about how, health issues with cancer. You looked at a cross hanging around somebody's neck. Find those commonalities, something that is common ground, interest. Maybe someone has an Auburn t-shirt on, and you can strike up a conversation about Auburn. What'd you say, boring? And hey, when I wear a Tennessee shirt, often the conversation is negative that I receive from that. But that's okay, because it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. Usually it's kind of a little jab if you're talking about college athletics. But, it could be something else. You could hear something in their voice that they're not from around here. And so you may talk to them about, where they were from. Or I talked to one of the ladies, that oyster lady today, about, and I didn't get her name, but about mussels, because mussels are cheaper than oysters. And we learned to eat mussels when we lived in Maine, because there are no oysters. And so we began to go down this road because mussels were sitting there, and she had never eaten mussels before. And so she was talking about anyway, so find that common ground, something you see, like I said, the cross, a t-shirt, somewhere that you were at the oncology clinic, you were at Burger King, everybody was getting something to eat, you were at the jail, that's where you work, you're there a lot. And so that's a place where you're going to see people. Where else? I know some of you have let me know places and things. Think in your head, what were some commonalities that when you talked to people this week that you cued in on and used as an advantage or a conversation starter? Anything that was common? What?
A gym.
Okay, a gym. Yeah, you guys were both working out, right? All right, Super Bowl's coming up, right? So that's a commonality. What else? Okay, everybody likes to eat, right? So find common out. What else? Can you think of another example? What are you doing tomorrow? That you have plans for. Do what? All right. So you've got people that played the same game, right? They have some similar experiences. How many of you are going to work tomorrow? Right? Yeah.
So I'm at the gym, and I'm talking to other old guys.
Other old guys. You go during the retired guy hours, don't you?
And we're aching, and we got pain and so forth like that. And I said, I can't wait till I get my new body. He said, new body? I said, yeah, when I go to heaven. He said, heaven? I said, you're going to heaven, aren't you? And he said, I hope. So, that was an entrance.
Yeah. And we can find those things and build off of those. Let me encourage you, when those connections are made, make sure that you listen to them if they'll talk as much as you can. Because sometimes we want to do all the talking, and it's really important that we're not checking off them as a project. That you're listening to them, that you're caring for them. Somebody talked about praying for them, and you talked about praying for this person who is your nemesis. And am I still on here? I'm on here. Good. That, as I keep walking around with this, but I don't really need both of them, I don't guess. So you talked about prayer, and that's a place where you can listen to their needs, note it, and pray for those things. So listen to their story, their experiences. I had to hear about the hypocrites that were in church, which is you always hear about that as a reason that people leave, but I don't think I've ever had anybody actually tell me that. That was the words that they used. Well, found there were so many hypocrites there. And I was like, wow, okay, there's that excuse. I've never heard that excuse in words just like that, although I've taught over and over about that. So when you're listening to their story, when you're drawing those connections, try to focus on names. Try to focus on those things where, they graduated Auburn in the 50s, like Randy, you're going to cue in on that. I learned today what year that Pam was born in because she commented about her age. Remember every little detail. So if you get to pray with that person, you can pray with detail. Because that's my next point is after you find those connections, try to pray for people. Again, this communicates that you care for them. One of the things that we learned back when we did an evangelism training called No Place Left was that you continually pray for your neighbors. That's where we do the Bless Every Home prayer ministry, and you sign up and you pray for your neighbors. Many of you do that so faithfully, so let me just say thank you, and I know the Lord will bless you for that. And then you're able to come to your neighbor and say, hey, I've been praying for you for a long time. How can I pray for you specifically? Prayer is a really wide open door to let somebody know that you actually care for them and you're going to talk to God on their behalf. That is a real thing. Very seldom when you ask people, is there anything that I can pray for you about? Are they going to say no? Now, the exception to that is when. There's an exception to this rule I've found out. In general, I don't get turned down for prayer, and probably you don't, except one place. And that's the food line. Almost every time I go through the food line and pray for people, there will be one, maybe two people that I talk with who do not want you to pray with them. It's the oddest thing. I've never encountered it outside of that context.
When we were going around and visiting, when we were doing the circles thing before, we stopped in a neighborhood for people, and I went to a house where I knew those people we asked them, how can we pray for you? We don't need it. We're all prayed. We don't need your prayer. That happened to me 3 times that day over on Bethany
Wow.
Drive. And yeah, we don't need your prayers. And I was like stupefied. What do you mean?
What do you say to that, right? Okay, see ya.
Let your prayer out.
Yeah. We did have a Jewish guy whenever we were doing that. He would not even open the door to us and told us to go away. And we just said, we can pray for you. Do not pray for me. He was very specific. He wouldn't even come out the door. He was just yelling at us from over the door. It was interesting. But anyway, praying for people is an opportunity to care. And it's also an opportunity to, transition into a deeper story. When you're praying, and when you pray, if they say, yes, you can pray for me, and you just want to pray right there on their doorstep, in Publix, wherever, don't pray like it's your morning devotional prayer time, okay? Make it brief, make it specific. Dear Lord, I'm going to pray for this man's mom who's sick. No, I'm going to pray for Bob's mom, Sarah, who has cancer right now, and we're going to lift her up. And then it's very brief and done. But you have an opportunity at that point to share a little bit about your story. So let me give you a little technique. This is just a helpful time. And those of you who took the No Place Left training will recognize it. It's called a 15-second testimony. Okay, a 15-second testimony. And here's how it goes. It says, there was once a time in my life. Everybody say that with me. There was once a time in my life. Try it again. There was once a time in my life. Okay, now think back to when you came to know Jesus. Before that time, you may have been struggling. When I came to know Jesus, my family was falling apart. My parents had some major issues. They were about to divorce. I needed God badly. And so I was afraid, and I needed God to hear my prayer. So I want you to think for just a second about 2 things. They can be 2 one-word things or 2 ideas that were a part of your life before Jesus that catapulted you or were a catalyst to you coming to know Jesus. And so I would say there was once a time in my life where I was scared and I needed God to hear me. Okay, so take just a second. Think of those 2 words. Think about the time right before you came to know Christ. There was once a time in my life I was blank and blank. All right, who's got those 2 words? Michelle? Okay, say it all. Say, there was once a time in my...
There was once a time in my life where I was lost.
Okay. Somebody else?
There was once a time in my life when I felt unworthy.
Okay, somebody else? Lee?
One time in my life, I took my own life, tried to take my own,
Okay.
and I survived it. And when I did, I'll praise the Lord because I asked God to please give me another chance to let me live.
Good.
And I looked at the blackness, I saw the blackness of hell. And I saw my hand. I put my hand, and I couldn't see it. It was so black. And it was a warning. I need to straighten up my life, leading Christ.
All right, so there was once in a time in my life where I was hopeless and in the dark. All right, somebody else. Got 2 words that describe you before you came to know Christ. And it may be that you came to know Christ when you were really young, and so it's hard to think, well, I was hopeless and alone. But,
This is a time in my life where I didn't care. Even though I was in church and all that, I didn't care. I was out in space.
okay. All right, so we've got the 2 words. There was once a time in my life that I was this and this. Think about the cross in the middle, okay? The cross is in the middle. You got the 2 words here, cross in the center. 2 more words here. We'll get there in a second. But under the cross, there's 3 words. Okay? And they can be the same 3 words. They don't have to be, but they need to be pretty close to this. Okay? Then I learned about the love and the forgiveness of Jesus. And I surrendered my life to him. Okay, those are the 3 words: love, forgiveness, and surrendered. Okay, you really need an action verb there at the bottom of what you did. Surrendered is a good word. Followed is a good word. Reached out to Jesus. But in general, there was once a time in my life where I was scared and I needed God to hear me. And then I learned about the love and forgiveness of Jesus, and I surrendered my life to him. Okay? So let's try that. Turn to the person beside you, and one of you say, there was once a time in my life, and use your 2 words, and then I learned about the love, forgiveness, and surrender. Turn to the person on your right or left and take turns.
When you said that was at the bottom of the cross, right? In your illustration.
All right, so we're running out of time, but this is what it looks like. If you want to write it down, I don't know if you guys can see this, but what you see is you got your 2 words over here, cross in the middle, and the little crown on top. I know I can't draw, but this is supposed to be a crown because we're going to make Jesus king. It's King Jesus. We're surrendering our life to the king. But if you wanted to write it down on your hand or on a piece of paper, you got your 2 words here. My life, there was once a time in my life where I was scared and I needed God to hear me. And then I learned about the love of Jesus, the love and forgiveness of Jesus, and surrendered my life to him. And now I know he hears me and I have peace. And so you would take the other 2 words and relate them to your 2 fears or your 2 conditions or your 2 feelings in one side of the cross. And after you learned about Jesus and you surrendered your life or you followed Jesus or you repented, then, you had peace and you knew that God heard you. That, is my testimony. So, you can write those down for yourself. But that's the way that it's going to kind of look if you wrote it down on a piece of paper. Okay, so that gives you an opportunity. You've just prayed for the oyster lady at Publix. And y'all don't go and tell her that the pastor told me about you working here. But you just prayed for her and said, hey, she said, pray for me about this. And, she's has some anxiety about something. And so when I get done praying, I can say what? there was once a time in my life where I was scared and I needed God to hear me. And then I learned about the love and forgiveness of Jesus, and I surrendered my life to him. And then I had peace, and I knew he would hear me. 15 seconds, right? And there's my testimony. And I've transitioned all of a sudden from praying for somebody to giving them my testimony. Now, is it going to go further than that? Maybe you get to share 3 circles at that point. Maybe you get to elaborate on your testimony like that. You may be able to say, do you have a story like this? That's one of the other transitional phrases. So you've got there was once a time in my life transitional phrase after you pray. Then you've got this, have you ever had a story like this? Or do you have a story like this? Or have you ever had an experience like this, where you followed Jesus or made Jesus your king or something like that? So that's just connections, commonalities are one point. Secondly, prayer, and then your 15-second testimony. Let me make just a couple of comments quickly about the things you should avoid. Okay, avoid when you're having these starting out part of your conversations, whether you're sharing the gospel all the way, whether you're inviting somebody to church. I ended up saying, look, you can watch this on Facebook. And so maybe I'll have a Facebook viewer this week that we didn't have last week, so she didn't have to be around the hypocrites. And I told her I was the chief of hypocrites. I said, I get it. I said, there's a lot of hypocrites, and I said, I'm one of them. But anyway, try to avoid talking poorly or at least initiating any kind of poor talk about people, about institutions, unless you're talking about the Auburn basketball team, but seriously, institutions, other churches. Don't sit there and bash other churches. Don't bash other denominations, other religions. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where her answer was so broad that I started to ask her, was it somebody who hurt you? And specifically what she said was, she said, I went to church to hear the preacher, and to hear the word, but everybody else stood outside in the foyer when it was over and and talked about everybody. And so she did mention a specific, either instance or continual thing with the church. And I didn't go into it further past that because I wanted to get to, my testimony. I wanted to get to the gospel. I wanted to get to how we go from here rather than argue about whatever happened before that. Politics. Guys, you never know if you're talking to somebody who is very liberal. And you don't want to turn them off from a gospel that is incredibly good news because they may have voted for a different candidate than you did. Right? Is that fair? There's a lot of Republicans that need to get saved. And so don't talk bad about the Republicans. Refrain from talking about, your political views in this context. If you're standing on their front porch, don't talk about how high the grass is. I don't know if you've ever been on the porch and you're waiting for somebody. You knocked on the door and you're waiting. So you got your partner, a couple people that are there, and you're looking around, just kind of waiting. And there's toys all in the yard, or there's a car up on cinder blocks, and you're talking about, look at that car, and you realize the window's open. Don't talk about, now everybody has a Ring doorbell. This was really before that, but anyway, just be careful what you say. Try to make sure that you don't offend, unnecessarily when you're having those conversations. Don't initiate this. They may bring into those negative feelings. They may talk about Baptists. Are you Baptist? I don't want to be Baptist. They may bring up politics. Point them back. to the gospel. Point them back to there was a time in my life when I was scared. I needed God to hear me. I heard about the love of Jesus and his forgiveness. I surrendered to him, and then I had peace, and I knew he heard me. That was like less than 10 seconds. Yeah, we'll get to that next week because we're going to talk about some objections because I do think there are some things we can equip ourselves with, to do that. But remember, we want to make sure in these encounters that the gospel stays the main thing because we can minister to anybody regardless of what state they are in. But let me go with that a little bit. Let me play off that a little bit and say, it's good to always leave the door open. So let's say that you do, whether it's the person who has a problem with hypocrites or the person who's part of the LGBTQ lifestyle. In fact, I know somebody in our church who had a conversation this week with somebody who's part of that agenda, that LGBTQ agenda. They're living that lifestyle, and they believe that as Bible-believing Christians, we hate them. That's what they believe in. And we've earned that, okay? That's not on them necessarily, but their perception was that we hate all LGBTQ people. And the person in our church had to try to correct the fact that, we don't hate them as a person, and they're welcome to come here to our church. We would love to have them, come and be with us on a Sunday morning. And I think that was pretty shocking to that person. And so remember, keep things gospel-centered best you can. But let's say they I don't want to do that, but maybe they say, we can talk about this later. Okay. Always leave the door open for further discussion. You may come across people who God is working on, and they need somebody like you to help them. And so you get there just on a particular day. You're just out of nowhere. You're knocking on doors that are down the street, and you just show up on the day that they need somebody, and they've been thinking about God. And so you can help them take that next step along. This is a book that I want to recommend to you. It's called Live Sent. You Are a Letter. By Jason Dukes. You can take a look at it a little bit later. It's called Live Sent, and he talks about the process of people taking little baby steps towards Christ, and people who drop in their lives and circumstances and situations in their life, leading them up to a point where they surrender their life. And so you've got to always leave the door open if they want to talk about stuff like that. Because it could be that they are living that lifestyle, but secretly they don't want to be. Or secretly they've been laying in bed at night thinking, this is not right, I hate this, and I wish things were different. And they don't want to tell anybody, but you just show up and they don't know you from Adam, so maybe you're safe to tell. And so always leave the door open to come back and be that letter that gets a person from, -7 to -5 as they're on their way to that 0 date where they receive Christ and then they start on their maturity level. So you can offer to, would you like me to come back and talk about it? Read the Bible with you one day. That's a good open door. And meet him at Starbucks or whatever to do that. But always leave that door open to do that. And good thing you can do, again, just as part of leaving the door open, is know that you can always get them to our website. All the cards, there's a bunch of cards out there on the Next Steps table that have our website on there. On the website, if you go on the front page of our website, and it's not a big, cute, super fancy website, but on the front page it says, would you like to know how to become a Christian? And if they click on that, it'll take them to a link where it explains the gospel very nicely. And so if you can get folks who won't come here because whatever reason, tell them, hey, we're on Facebook every day. We've got a YouTube channel. That's one of the resources I would recommend to you because we put all our messages up on YouTube. But also we have things there that are like playlists. Like if you go on our YouTube channel right now, you can find a playlist there from the No Place Left training. So the training that we did 2 years ago on learning how to share the gospel, there's like 5 videos that you can watch and learn the No Place Left method to share the gospel. And so our YouTube site is a great site. Even, what the Western Heights Baptist Church, under the playlist No Place Left initial training, you can watch those. You can learn how to share those. In fact, you'll see some of our people on it because they're recordings of Zoom calls. And then there's some other ones that are the short versions, just instruction versions. So those are good things. Of course, our social media. And let's see here. Oh,
I have a hard time pulling up the social. I look under Facebook and I look under YouTube. And I was looking for a specific date so I could look at and review the sermon. I don't know how to find the sermon.
okay. Let me give you a suggestion. Do you get the emails that I send out every so often? Okay, on the bottom, you can click the link for YouTube, and it'll take you to our channel, to the Western Heights channel. And it'll give you just the videos that we've shared on there. And it should go pretty much by date as you go backwards, but it should say the date out there on the side somewhere. And it'll give the title and so forth. So check that. You can, the Facebook's a little harder to navigate because there's other things, but if you go to there, and it'll also list on our site playlists, as I mentioned, and there's some for No Place Left, there's some for this one. There's actually one that says the Sharing Your Faith Without Fear. We're making a playlist just for these sessions. But there's one that says Worship Services. And so if you pick that playlist, it'll go right back on the worship services. And that's YouTube. That's the easiest place to see them. We don't stream it on YouTube, but I put it up Monday every week. And so we do it live on Facebook every Sunday morning, but Monday I cut it and paste it and enhance it. So Tuesday or Monday morning, you have a nice YouTube video of just the sermon. So, all right. The only resource that I want to recommend is the No Place Left website. It's got some great training, and it's No Place Left, just no spaces, no nothing, .net. And so there's a ton of training videos. Really, there's too many, but you can search through there. There's a lot of good resources. No Place Left is an evangelism and church planting method that was developed in Southeast Asia to train people, when they come to know Christ, disciple them, train them to go and make disciples in the next village. And when they make disciples in the next village, disciple that one, let them go to the next village. So it's a rapid church planting and easy discipleship method. And so the noplaceleft.net website is a good resource. So, all right. We out of time. Quick questions though. Anybody?